The mahogany bedroom fell silent. Jonathan Whitmore's hand trembled as he reached toward the young woman in the crisp black and white uniform. Their faces were inches apart. "Please," he whispered. Estate manager Catherine Miles stood frozen in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth in shock. "But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to that morning when Detective Olivia Hart first received the call." Hart speaking. "We've got a situation at the Whitmore townhouse in Manhattan's East 73rd Street. Dispatch crackled through her radio. Possible assault. Victim is requesting specifically to speak with detectives." Olivia glanced at her partner, Detective Marcus Cole, who was already grabbing his jacket. "On our way," she replied. But what she didn't know yet was that this case would uncover a 15-year deception that destroyed 2 lives. The Whitmore townhouse commanded respect from its gated courtyard on East 73rd Street. Built in 1923, the limestone facade had witnessed nearly a century of Manhattan elite secrets. Behind wrought iron gates and mature oak trees, the 4-story building stood like a fortress of old money. Marcus whistled low as they approached the private entrance. "Definitely not from my neighborhood. This block probably costs more than I'll make in 10 lifetimes." Security cameras tracked their every movement from the moment they entered the courtyard. Olivia made a mental note to request the footage. A young woman met them at the mahogany front door. Her name was Elena Vasquez, 26 years old, with dark eyes that held too much sadness. Her hands shook as she spoke, and her black and white uniform was perfectly pressed despite the morning's chaos. "I'm the one who called," she said quietly, her accent carrying hints of Queens. "I work here as household staff." Olivia noticed the hesitation. "What exactly happened, Elena?" "Mr. Whitmore, in his bedroom upstairs." Elena's voice cracked. "Catherine saw us. She thinks something happened that didn't happen." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking much younger than 26. "There's something I need to show you. A letter, from 2009. It changes everything." But what Elena didn't know was that someone had spent 15 years making sure she'd never find that letter. Catherine Miles told a different story from her corner office overlooking the townhouse's private garden. 23 years of service showed in every detail. Family photographs spanning decades, commendation letters, and a crystal paperweight engraved with "Dedicated Service 2010. That girl was in Jonathan's private quarters at 7:30 this morning. Highly inappropriate positioning." Marcus leaned forward. "Positioned how exactly?" "Close. Too close." His hand reaching toward her face, intense eye contact. Catherine poured tea with steady hands. "I've managed this household through every crisis. I know inappropriate behavior when I see it." But Olivia sensed something else in Catherine's eyes when she mentioned crises. Fear. "How long have you worked here, Catherine?" 23 years. "I started when Margaret was still alive. I've seen this family through everything, the good times and the devastating losses." Marcus made notes. "Margaret Whitmore died 15 years ago." Catherine's composure flickered. "Yes, complications during her high-risk pregnancy. She was finalizing an adoption at the time. The stress, it contributed to her condition." "What adoption?" "A foster child from Queens. Margaret was obsessed with saving this damaged little girl who'd survived a fire." Catherine turned to the window. "After Margaret died, there were decisions that had to be made about the child's future. Difficult decisions. But what Catherine didn't reveal was that some of those decisions weren't Jonathan's to make." Jonathan Whitmore entered the drawing room with quiet authority, but his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. His gray suit was perfectly tailored, but his hands trembled slightly. "Officers, I apologize for the confusion," he said. "There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding that required police intervention?" Olivia asked. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Elena received some troubling correspondence, anonymous materials about her past. I was helping her understand them when Catherine walked in." Marcus made a note. "Where are these materials now?" "For Elena's protection." But Elena's face had gone pale. She said nothing. Someone was lying about the letter's contents. Marcus pulled Olivia aside in the marble-floored hallway. "I want to check the security footage from this morning." 7:30 timeline. "Already requested," Olivia replied. "But there's something else. I called the adoption agency Catherine mentioned. Harmony Family Services closed in 2015, but I tracked down the former director." "What did she say?" "Margaret Whitmore did finalize an adoption in November 2009. But here's the interesting part. The birth certificate shows the adoption was never legally reversed." Marcus frowned. Which means legally, Elena Vasquez is still Elena Whitmore, And someone's been hiding that fact for 15 years. What they didn't know yet was that the person hiding it was closer than they thought. In the townhouse's professional kitchen, Elena finally found the courage to speak. Surrounded by copper pots and warm pendant lights, this was her domain, the one place where she felt control. There were no anonymous threats, she whispered. The letter, it's about something that happened when I was 11. Olivia sat across from her at the breakfast nook. What happened when you were 11? I lived with the Martinez family in Queens. Foster care. There was an electrical fire in our building. I got trapped on the third floor. Elena's hands trembled around her coffee mug. The smoke inhalation, I was hospitalized for weeks. The social worker said a wealthy Manhattan family had seen my story in the newspaper and wanted to adopt me. Marcus leaned forward gently. What family? The Whitmores. Margaret Whitmore specifically. She visited me in the hospital, brought books, told me about this house. I was supposed to become Elena Whitmore. Elena walked to the window overlooking the garden. The paperwork was finalized November 15th, 2009. I spent 3 weeks here as their daughter. Margaret taught me to braid friendship bracelets with embroidery thread. She said I was her miracle baby. The kitchen fell silent except for the antique clocks ticking. But then Margaret died in childbirth. And suddenly, everyone said Mr. Whitmore had changed his mind about keeping me. Elena's voice broke. What I found last month, in that sealed envelope from 2009, was a letter Margaret wrote to me before she died, hidden in her jewelry box all these years. But what Elena didn't realize was that someone had made sure that letter stayed hidden until now. Marcus returned from the security office with troubling news. The cameras have a blind spot directly outside Jonathan's bedroom door. Convenient. Too convenient, Olivia agreed. I also ran Elena's background. She's been working minimum wage jobs since aging out of foster care at 18. But bank records show anonymous payments to her education fund from 2009 to 2018. Anonymous payments, traced to a Whitmore family trust. Someone's been watching her from a distance. They climbed the grand staircase to examine the bedroom where the incident occurred. And there's something else, Marcus added quietly. I pulled Catherine Miles's employment records. She's been receiving annual bonuses every November 15th since 2009, the exact date of Elena's adoption. Bonuses for what? That's what we need to find out. But what they discovered next would change everything they thought they knew about loyalty. Elena led them to her third-floor room, where she'd hidden Margaret's letter. The envelope was yellowed with age, sealed with wax that bore Margaret Whitmore's initials. Read it, Elena said, her hands shaking. Olivia opened the letter carefully. Margaret's handwriting was elegant but urgent. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, but you're still here. I need you to know that you are my daughter, in every way that matters. The adoption papers are final and legal. You belong to this family forever. Marcus studied the rest of the letter. It gives specific instructions about a trust fund, inheritance rights, and, he paused, it names Catherine Miles as someone Elena should never trust. What does it say about Catherine? That Catherine tried to convince Margaret not to adopt, that she called Elena damaged goods and said Jonathan would regret taking in a broken foster child. Elena gasped. Catherine told me yesterday that Margaret specifically requested her to help with the transition, that she was trying to honor Margaret's wishes. Margaret's letter says the opposite. She warns that Catherine will try to separate you from this family if given the chance, and then the timeline stopped making sense completely. In Catherine's office, Olivia noticed something she'd missed earlier. Among the family photographs spanning decades, there wasn't a single picture of Elena from her 3 weeks as a Whitmore in 2009. Catherine, Marcus said carefully, we need to see Elena's employment file from when she was hired 6 months ago. Catherine's hands hesitated over the filing cabinet. I'm not sure that's necessary. We'll get a warrant if needed. Catherine reluctantly pulled out a thin folder. Inside was Elena's application, but the address listed was wrong. This application shows Elena living at an address in Brooklyn, Olivia noted, but Elena told us she was cleaning out an apartment in Queens when she found the letter. People move, Catherine said quickly, except this Brooklyn address belongs to a mail forwarding service. Someone's been tracking Elena's location and feeding information to a third party. Marcus checked his phone. The forwarding service has been paid by automatic bank transfer from the same Whitmore trust that's been supporting Elena. Catherine, Olivia said slowly, how did Elena know about the job opening here? For the first time, Catherine's composure cracked completely. She answered a posting. Online. What posting? There's no record of any job posting for this position. But Catherine had no answer that didn't incriminate herself further. The confrontation came as afternoon shadows stretched across the townhouse's marble floors. Catherine stood in the hallway, outside Jonathan's bedroom, her face pale with 23 years of buried truth. "You don't understand," she said desperately. "I was protecting him." Elena emerged from the shadows. She'd been listening. Protecting him from what? Marcus and Olivia watched as Catherine's carefully constructed world began to crumble. "From you," Catherine whispered, "from the constant reminder of what he lost." Elena's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "What are you talking about?" "Margaret's death broke him completely. You looked exactly like her, had her mannerisms. Every time Jonathan saw you those 3 weeks, he fell apart." Catherine's voice cracked with 15 years of rationalization. "The agency said it would be better if you were placed elsewhere. I convinced Jonathan it was the right thing to do, for both of you. But that wasn't your decision to make," Olivia said. "Someone had to make it," Catherine snapped. Jonathan was catatonic with grief. He couldn't even get dressed without help, let alone raise a traumatized 11-year-old. Elena stepped closer. "So you decided my fate, without asking me. I hoped that if enough time passed, you'd both move on. But you didn't just place me elsewhere," Elena said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You've been watching me, tracking me, making sure I'd find my way back here when I was old enough." Catherine's mask finally fell away completely. "I've spent 15 years watching Jonathan mourn a daughter he could have kept, watching him build walls around his heart. I realized I'd made the wrong choice." Marcus leaned forward. "So you arranged for Elena to find the job posting here." "I created a fake online listing 6 months ago, used her forwarding address to make sure she saw it. When she applied, I made sure Jonathan was the one who interviewed her." The truth hung in the air like poison. "You destroyed my childhood and stole 15 years from both of us," Elena said, "because you thought you knew what was best." But Catherine's final confession was still to come. In the mahogany bedroom where this all began, Elena finally understood the scene Catherine had witnessed that morning. "I found Margaret's letter yesterday," Elena explained to the detectives. "I brought it to Jonathan. I needed to know if what she wrote was true, that I was legally still his daughter." Jonathan nodded slowly. "She showed me the adoption papers I thought had been destroyed, the letter Margaret hid from Catherine all these years. When Catherine saw us this morning, I was crying. Jonathan was trying to comfort me. We were talking about whether we could find our way back to being a family." Elena looked directly at Catherine. "We weren't having an affair. A father was trying to comfort the daughter he thought he'd lost forever." Catherine stood frozen in the doorway, just as she had that morning. "I realized," she whispered, "that you'd found Margaret's letter, the one I'd searched for years to destroy. I knew once you read it, you'd understand what I'd done." She turned to Elena with tears in her eyes. "I robbed you of a father, I robbed him of a daughter, and I robbed myself of any chance at redemption. This was the moment that changed everything. Minor milamorum, reglet what is palmi was life my resolve nuglazin." But 2 hours later, as evening settled over East 73rd Street, the truth had finally set them all free. Elena sat across from Jonathan in the drawing room. Margaret's letter and the adoption papers spread between them like a bridge across 15 lost years. "I don't expect you to call me Dad," he said quietly. "I haven't earned that right." "Maybe not yet," Elena replied, "but Margaret chose me, and she chose you. Maybe we can choose each other too." Outside in the hallway, Catherine packed her belongings with the quiet dignity of someone finally facing consequences. Olivia found her there. "Where will you go?" "I have a sister in Portland. She's been asking me to visit for years." Catherine closed her suitcase. "It's time I stopped living in someone else's life and started living my own." Marcus watched through the window as Catherine's taxi disappeared into the New York evening. "Think they'll be okay?" he asked Olivia. "It'll take time, but truth has a way of healing what lies destroy." As the detectives prepared to leave, Elena walked them to the front door. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you learn what it means to be a Whitmore," Olivia said gently, "and Jonathan learns what it means to be the father Margaret always believed he could be." Elena smiled for the first time since they'd met her. Do you think she would be proud of how this ended?" Olivia looked back at the townhouse, where Jonathan stood silhouetted in the doorway, waiting for his daughter to come home. "I think Margaret would say that love always finds a way back to where it belongs." The gates of the Whitmore courtyard closed behind them, but for the first time in 15 years, they weren't locking anyone out. They were protecting something precious that had finally been found. Sometimes the greatest detective work isn't solving a crime. Sometimes it's solving a family. What secrets might be hiding in your own family's past? And what would you do if you discovered that your entire life story was built on someone else's well-meaning lie? All characters and institutions in this story are entirely fictional, and any resemblance to real ones is purely coincidental.